Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and deliver the essential insights on the world's most complex topics. Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into a crucial and often sensitive subject, the historical roots and ongoing complexities of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
It's definitely a topic steeped in millennia of history, faith, and identity. And our source material for this deep dive, it comes from a document penned by someone with a truly unique, multifaceted heritage familial roots extending into Black, Arab, and Jewish communities. So it offers a perspective aiming for impartiality, and a rejection of bigotry that's particularly valuable here.
Right, so our mission today is to help you navigate the intricate historical narratives, understand the core dynamics that have shaped this region, and really distill the most important knowledge. You'll gain a thorough understanding of the major events, key players, and, well, the intertwining perspectives that continue to define the quest for peace.
Exactly. We're going to explore some surprising facts, delve into moments of tension, but also cooperation, and equip you with the context to truly be well informed on this vital issue. So, as we begin to unpack this long and intricate history, what foundational elements do you see really shaping the story right from the start?
Well, to truly grasp the current situation, I think we have to go way back. Our source material describes a kind of foundational family feud, tracing all the way back to Abraham.
That's a critical starting point, absolutely. Abraham, a patriarch revered across Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions, he fathered Ishmael with Hagar and Isaac with Sarah. Now, Ishmael is widely considered the progenitor of Arab peoples, while Isaac is traditionally seen as the ancestor of the Jewish nation. What's insightful here, though, is that early records suggest peaceful interaction between the brothers. The tension, however, it seems to escalate in the very next generation. Isaac's twin sons, Esau and Jacob. They struggled even before birth, kind of foreshadowing a lifetime of competition and, well, perhaps the origins of broader regional dynamics.
So we have these ancient familial ties, these rivalries. What was life actually like in this region, the land that later became known as Palestine, before the major modern political shifts of the 20th century? What were those foundational experiences?
Yeah, before the 20th century, this land saw profound political, social, and religious evolution. I mean, think about the unified kingdom of Israel. After Solomon's reign, around 930 BCE, it split into two, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. And this division, it was fueled by things like heady taxation and forced labor, which underscores some early internal strife and the challenge of just maintaining unity.
And later the Judeans faced exile in Babylon. But remarkably, they managed to maintain their identity. How significant was that period?
Oh, profoundly significant. Figures like Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego became, well, powerful symbols of faithfulness. They refused to deny their faith or worship foreign gods despite immense pressure to assimilate. This era really cemented a determination within the Jewish people not to forget their identity and spiritual heritage, even when scattered in diaspora.
Okay, what other major influences shaped this region before the Roman Empire arrived and, transformed everything?
Well, in the centuries before Roman occupation, Jewish society was largely focused on rebuilding Jerusalem, constructing the Second Temple, spiritually reestablishing their covenant with God after the Babylonian exile. This was also the time of hugely influential prophets like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. Their writings profoundly shaped subsequent generations and really all the Abrahamic faiths. Then you have the Greeks under Alexander the Great conquering Palestine in 332 BCE. That ushered in Hellenistic influence, leading to a diverse Jewish life where, some embraced Hellenism while others staunchly opposed it. There was even the successful Maccabean revolt, resulting in a period of Jewish independence under the Hasmonean dynasty. So there were periods of self-governance, too.
And then, as you mentioned, the Romans entered the picture. Their arrival truly marked a turning point, didn't it?
Absolutely, a huge turning point. Rome first gained a foothold in Palestine in 63 BCE, basically by intervening in a Jewish civil war. They ended the Hasmonean dynasty and eventually made Judea a Roman province by 6 CE, installing governors like Pontius Pilate. Now, the Jewish people deeply resented this rule, which led to a series of revolts. The most famous, of course, was the Great Jewish Revolt in 66 CE, which tragically saw the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, a devastating event. Then the Bar Kokhba revolt in 135 CE was also brutally suppressed, and the Romans, aiming to minimize Jewish identification with the land, actually renamed Judea to Palestina. This historical act of renaming, it highlights an attempt to sort of erase a deeply rooted connection.
So amidst all this political upheaval, what was the demographic makeup of Palestine during this Roman period? Who actually lived there?
It was incredibly diverse, a vibrant societal patchwork, really. You had Jews, Samaritans, Greeks, Romans, many other ethnic groups living side by side, each largely adhering to their own customs, laws, and beliefs. The Jewish people, tracing their lineage back to ancient times, were deeply, deeply rooted in the land, bound by the Torah and their covenant with God. This diverse yet interconnected population is a crucial backdrop for what comes next.
Okay, moving on. Our source dedicates a pretty significant section to Jesus. How does his story fit into this complex historical backdrop of Roman-occupied Palestine? What does it tell us about the region's dynamics, then?
Well, the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem, for instance, it happened directly under Roman rule. His parents were traveling to comply with the Roman census. And our source even highlights that Jesus' family were effectively immigrants. They emigrated to Egypt because King Herod the Great, notorious for his brutal measures to safeguard his throne,
Yeah.
ordered the killing of the newborn king of the Jews out of paranoia. So this early political escape really underlines the volatile environment of the time.
So, right from the beginning, his life was shaped by the political landscape. What about his public ministry within that context?
His public ministry, which began around age 33 after being baptized by John the Baptist, it was marked by miracles, healing the sick, feeding thousands, walking on water. These acts weren't just spiritual, they were powerful public displays that amassed followers. And as his influence grew, so did tensions with the religious elite, like the Pharisees and Sadducees, prominent Jewish factions back then, who saw him as a threat to their authority under Roman rule. The Romans themselves, initially indifferent, apparently grew perplexed as Jesus claimed a kingdom not of this world, a claim that, could easily be misinterpreted as a challenge to their authority. And he gathered this diverse group of disciples, fishermen, tax collectors, even Mary Magdalene, highlighting the broad appeal of his message across society.
And then, of course, the crucifixion and resurrection. Foundational events for Christianity which profoundly reshaped the region's spiritual landscape.
Indeed. This pivotal event, it began with Judas Iscariot's betrayal and the Last Supper. The source notes how the same crowds that had heralded him then called for Barabbas' release. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, eventually yielded to their will. Jesus was crucified on Golgotha, uttering words of forgiveness, his death marked by dramatic events like darkness, the temple veil tearing. And on the third day, the tomb was found empty. He had risen, appearing to his disciples for 40 days before ascending. This narrative signifies Jesus' defeat of death, provides an aspiration for eternal hope, and commissions his followers to spread the good news.
So what happened to Palestine and its people after these events as Christianity began to spread?
While following Jesus' resurrection, the disciples regathered in Jerusalem. The day of Pentecost was a real turning point. There was this outpouring of the Holy Spirit, leading them to speak in tongues, igniting a boldness in Peter that really fueled the early Christian movement. And after the Romans, the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire maintained control. Christianity flourished them, becoming deeply integrated into the daily life and identity of the region.
This deep dive truly emphasizes the profound religious underpinnings of this region. So let's look closely at the three major Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which all hold this land sacred.
Right. They all trace their roots back to Abraham, sharing a belief in one God and revering many of the same prophets. Islam emerged approximately 600 years after Christianity, with the Prophet Muhammad's revelations compiled into the Quran. And the relationship between Abraham and Ishmael is particularly significant in Jewish and Islamic traditions, with the Kaaba in Mecca revered as a site established by Abraham and Ishmael. This shared lineage is a powerful yet often overlooked common thread.
What are some of the key distinctions and maybe internal dynamics within each faith that our source highlights? Let's start with Judaism.
Sure. Judaism has indeed evolved into diverse expressions. Our source highlights Orthodox Judaism, which upholds traditional beliefs from the Torah and Talmud. And within that, you have variations like Modern Orthodox, balancing tradition with secular society, and Haredi, or Ultra-Orthodox, emphasizing stricter observance, often living in more secluded communities. Then there's Conservative Judaism, balancing tradition with modern influences, Reform Judaism, which emphasizes personal autonomy and adapts Jewish law, and Reconstructionist Judaism, viewing it as an evolving civilization.
And here's something fascinating from our source. It points to a distinct absence of internal armed conflicts within Judaism, especially when you compare it to Christianity and Islam. Why is that significant, and how has internal conflict manifested instead?
That is a truly insightful observation, yeah. The source points out that disputes within Judaism have primarily been intellectual and theological. You see this in the vigorous rabbinical debates recorded in the Talmud. Even historical divisions like the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Zealots during the Second Temple period, or the Maimonides controversy in the 12th century, they largely manifested as ideological disagreements or social movements, not really outright wars. Now, in modern times, the establishment of Israel did create new fault lines, between secular and religious Jews, different denominations, but these have largely played out as political debates or social activism, not civil wars. The assassination of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin in 1995 is cited as the worst act of violence within Judaism in the territory, which kind of underscores this historical pattern of intellectual rather than armed dispute. It's quite unique.
That's a really powerful contrast. Okay, now on to Christianity. How has its history been shaped by internal conflict?
Well, Christianity, with Jesus as its central figure, it has a very different history when it comes to internal divisions. Unfortunately, yes. The first major split, the Great Schism, occurred in the 11th century, separating the Eastern Orthodox from the Roman Catholic churches. Then the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century led to further divisions and, frankly, violent conflicts across Europe: the 30 Years' War, French Wars of Religion, the English Civil War. Even the Crusades, primarily aimed at recapturing the Holy Land from Muslim control, saw Western Christians sacking Constantinople, a major Christian city. Our source even mentions a really disturbing example: a slave Bible used by certain Christian groups in the Americas. It deliberately omitted sections promoting emancipation and equality. This starkly illustrates a critical distinction between the religion's core teachings and how its adherents sometimes act, often manipulating faith for power or control.
And how about Islam? What are its primary divisions, and has it experienced similar internal conflicts?
So Islam emerged in the 7th century under Prophet Muhammad. The primary division is between Sunni, the majority, emphasizing elected caliphs and Muhammad's practices, and Shia, who believe in direct lineage and divine appointment of imams. There are other sects too, like Sufis, Ismailis, and Zaydis. Islam shares prophets with Judaism and Christianity, but views the Quran as the final revelation and Jesus as a prophet, not divine. It's also universal in its call, unlike Judaism, which is traditionally tied to the Hebrew people. And yes, Islam's history has seen periods of both profound unity and significant division. Conflicts have arisen over doctrine, leadership, territorial control. Ancient conflicts include the First Fitna, that was 656-661 CE, the Battle of Karbala in 680 CE, hugely significant for Shia Islam, and the Berber Revolt from 739-743 CE. More recently, things like the Iran-Iraq War, the Syrian Civil War, and the Yemeni Civil War are cited as conflicts with religious undertones alongside very complex political and territorial ambitions.
So given these varied histories, how do these three faiths generally view conflict and that ancient law of retaliation, an eye for an eye, the lex talionis?
This is a crucial point of distinction and really interesting. Our source examines the lex talionis from the Old Testament. In Jewish tradition, an eye for an eye is not taken literally. Talmudic sages actually emphasize compensation and ethical justice, not physical harm. So if someone caused an injury, the focus was on fair monetary payment, reflecting a deep concern for restorative justice. Judaism also distinguishes between milkamet mitzvah, a commanded war purely for defense, and milkamet rishat, an optional war, maybe for expansion, which is subject to rigorous scrutiny. For Christians, Jesus' teachings like turn the other cheek, that's Matthew 5.3839, fundamentally challenge retribution, promoting non-retaliation and forgiveness instead. The Christian perspective on war often aligns with the just war theory developed by Augustine, refined by Thomas Aquinas, or strict pacifism like you see with groups such as the Quakers. In Islam, the principle of qisas, or retaliation, is similarly interpreted often as compensation to the victim, not necessarily literal physical harm. It requires a rigorous legal process and state authority to enact. So these interpretations highlight a complex balance, really, between justice, mercy, and societal order across the faiths.
Okay, let's fast forward now to the 20th century. This period truly set the stage for the current Israeli-Palestinian conflict. After World War I, Britain took control of Palestine from the Ottoman Empire. How did this transition fundamentally shape the region's future?
The British takeover was monumental, primarily because it directly enabled the 1917 Balfour Declaration. This declaration expressed British support for establishing a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, which was then still under Ottoman rule. This policy, implemented under a League of Nations mandate from 1920 to 1948, directly shaped the region's future. For the Arab majority living there, British actions, especially supporting Jewish immigration, were perceived as a deep betrayal. This fueled resentment and led to significant unrest, most notably the Arab Revolt of 1936-1939.
But Jewish groups also grew frustrated with British policies later on, didn't they? It sounds like, well, nobody was fully satisfied.
Yeah, that's exactly right. While initially welcomed by Zionists, British policies shifted, particularly the 1939 White Paper, which severely limited Jewish immigration right during World War II and the Holocaust. This deeply frustrated Zionist aspirations. This frustration led to the emergence of Jewish paramilitary groups like the Irgun and the Haganah, who engaged in armed resistance against British rule. Their actions, of course, are viewed very differently by some as freedom fighting against a colonial power, and by others as terrorism. It highlights the deeply contested narratives of that era.
The desire for Jewish statehood was clearly a powerful, enduring driver that had been building for decades, fueled by persecution.
Yes, absolutely. The Zionist movement, born in the late 19th century in response to escalating anti-Semitism and pogroms in Europe, advocated for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Figures like Theodor Herzl, author of Der Judenstaat, the Jewish state, envisioned a sanctuary where Jews could preserve their heritage free from fear. This quest was fueled not only by centuries of exile, but profoundly reinforced by the horrors of the Holocaust. It became seen as a desperate need for a bulwark against future genocides.
And the Jewish diaspora, particularly in the United States and Britain, played a crucial role in supporting this dream of statehood. How did that influence unfold?
Their influence was pivotal, yeah. Figures like Chaim Weizmann, a chemist who developed a crucial explosive ingredient for the British during World War I, leveraged his scientific contributions and connections to help secure the Balfour Declaration. In the U.S., the influential Jewish American community, alongside Christian Zionists, exerted significant political pressure and provided substantial financial support for the Zionist cause. This reflected cultural and religious motivations, but also a deep humanitarian desire to provide a safe haven after the Holocaust. This diaspora support has been, and remains, a formidable strength for Israel.
So with all these tensions escalating, Arab resentment, Zionist aspirations, British struggles, what was the ultimate turning point that led directly to the declaration of the State of Israel?
The British, basically overwhelmed by the escalating violence and unable to manage the conflict, turned the issue over to the newly formed United Nations. In 1947, the UN proposed a partition plan. The idea was to create separate Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem designated as an international city. The Jewish leadership, seeing it as the best path to statehood, largely accepted this plan. The Arab leadership and the broader Arab community, however, rejected it outright. They viewed it as an unjust division of their land imposed by outside powers. This rejection led directly to the outbreak of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, immediately following the end of the British Mandate in May 1948.
That 1948 war was monumental, profoundly altering the trajectory of the region. So what was its lasting impact on the land and its people?
Well, the 1948 war led to the creation of the State of Israel on May 14, 1948. That's the headline outcome. Crucially, however, no Palestinian state was established alongside it. Instead, Egypt gained control of the Gaza Strip and Jordan annexed the West Bank. For Palestinian Arabs, this conflict caused a mass displacement and dispossession. Hundreds of thousands became refugees. It's an event they call the Nakba, or catastrophe. This moment irrevocably cemented the core of the modern Arab-Israeli and specifically the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It wasn't just a war, it was a foundational rupture for generations.
And that 1948 war, as devastating as it was just the beginning. It seemed to have set off a cycle of violence that has continued for decades. Instead of just a long list, can we look at the types of conflicts and major turning points that have defined this ongoing struggle since then?
Absolutely. It helps to group them, I think. We can identify distinct phases, each reshaping the landscape and the conflict itself. First, you had early infiltrations and border skirmishes in the 1950s and 60s. After 1948, Palestinian Fedayeen groups launched attacks from neighboring countries into Israel. This era also included the 1956 Suez Crisis, a major international incident involving Egypt, Israel, France, and Britain over the canal.
Okay, so border issues and early resistance. Then what?
Then came the wars that redefined borders 1967 and 1973. The 1967 Six-Day War was absolutely critical. Israel launched a preemptive strike and captured the West Bank, Gaza Strip, Sinai Peninsula, and Golan Heights. This occupation remains a central point of contention today. That was followed by the 1969-1970 War of Attrition, mostly between Egypt and Israel, and then the 1973 Yom Kippur War, a surprise attack by Egypt and Syria, which shook Israel initially and led to significant U.S. and Soviet involvement.
Right. Those wars dramatically changed the map and the power dynamics. What followed that era?
Next, you see the rise of intifadas and resistance movements, starting mainly in the late 80s. The 1987-1993 First Intifada was a widespread Palestinian uprising protests, strikes, civil disobedience against the occupation in the West Bank and Gaza, a real popular movement. This period also saw the 1985-2000 South Lebanon conflict, where Hezbollah emerged as a significant adversary for Israel.
And more recently, the focus seems to have shifted heavily towards Gaza.
Yeah. Exactly. The later phase could be characterized as Gaza-focused conflicts, especially after Israel's 2005 disengagement from Gaza. You had the 2006 Lebanon War, triggered by Hezbollah actions. Then a series of intense conflicts centered on Gaza, the 2008-2009 Gaza War, Operation Cast Lead, 2012 Operation Pillar of Defense, 2014 Operation Protective Edge. These were largely aimed at halting rocket fire and involved heavy Israeli responses. We also saw the 2021 Israel-Palestine crisis, an 11-day conflict. And finally, the most recent major escalation described in our source, the 2023 Israel-Hamas war, initiated by that devastating Hamas attack on October 7th, killing around 1,200 Israelis and taking over 250 hostages. This conflict was ongoing when the source material was finalized, marking a brutal new chapter.
That really helps frame the long, difficult history. It's not just one conflict, but evolving phases. Now, beyond this cycle of conflict, our source also highlights what makes Israel a particularly formidable force in the region. What are its core strengths?
Right. The source details several qualities that collectively contribute to Israel's position. First, diligence. This is described as more than just hard work. It's a deeply ingrained ethos of unwavering commitment to preparedness, really rooted in its complex history and precarious geopolitical situation. It extends to diplomacy, too.
Preparedness, okay.
What else? Second, resilience. Shaped by that history of overcoming immense adversity, Israel shows an extraordinary ability not just to endure, but to adapt and thrive. You see it in its military, its economy, its technological advancements like achieving a high standard of living despite few natural resources and strong community solidarity.
Makes sense. And innovation is often mentioned.
Definitely. Third, innovation. Israel's investment in R&D is among the highest globally. This leads to cutting-edge defense tech like the Iron Dome, sophisticated cyber capabilities, advanced drones or SPVs. The whole startup nation ecosystem and its intelligence agencies, Moss and Shin Bet, are key parts of this.
Okay. Diligence, resilience, innovation.
Fourth, vigilance. Described as a blend of historical awareness, strategic foresight, and technology. It permeates society, reinforced by things like compulsory military service and high public security awareness. Fifth, education. Though not detailed heavily, the source points to a robust education system underpinning these other strengths, fostering skills and innovation. And finally, maybe crucially, powerful friends and influential diasporas. The strategic partnership with the United States is critical financial and military aid, technology access, joint exercises, intelligence sharing. Plus, the Jewish diaspora, especially in the US and UK, plays a huge role through advocacy, lobbying for favorable policies, acting as cultural ambassadors, and significant philanthropy supporting projects within Israel.
So a combination of internal drive and strong external support. Yet, despite this long history of conflict and these formidable strengths, there have been attempts at peace. Let's explore those moments when the region tried to shift course.
Yes, absolutely. The cycle of violence has been punctuated by significant efforts for peace, some with lasting, albeit incomplete, impact. You have the early 1947-1949 UN Partition Plan and the subsequent armistice agreements after the 1948 war. They established temporary borders for Israel, but crucially, without creating a Palestinian state, leaving that fundamental issue unresolved.
But the first major breakthrough, often cited as Camp David.
Right. A pivotal achievement was the 1978 Camp David Accords, brokered by U.S. President Jimmy Carter. This led to Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem begin signing a peace treaty. It marked the first time an Arab nation officially recognized Israel. Israel, in return, returned the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt. It really served as an inspiration for future diplomacy and cemented the U.S. role as a key mediator.
But the Camp David Accords, despite being a landmark achievement, also had significant and, well, tragic consequences, didn't they?
Tragically, yes. President Anwar Sadat was assassinated in 1981 by radical factions, largely seen as a direct consequence of making peace with Israel. His assassination underscored the dangerous path of peacemaking and the deep divisions within the Arab world regarding Israel. It led to a long period of resistance to normalization among other Arab leaders. And critically, the Accords didn't make substantial progress on the Palestinian issue itself. The PLO wasn't involved, so core issues like statehood, refugee rights, and the status of Jerusalem remained unresolved.
What other major attempts followed?
Well, later you had the 2005 Gaza disengagement plan, where Israel unilaterally withdrew its settlements and military from Gaza. But this was followed by Hamas winning the 2006 Palestinian elections and violently taking control of Gaza in 2007. This unfortunately led to the international isolation of Gaza and continued conflict cycles. More recently, from 2013-2014, there were the U.S.-led peace talks between Benjamin Netanyahu and Mahmoud Abbas, spearheaded by John Kerry. These ultimately collapsed. Our source attributes this to deep-seated differences, particularly over Israeli settlement expansion and Palestinian recognition of Israel as a Jewish state. And finally, the source mentions the 2020 Abraham Accords. While it doesn't detail their content, these accords facilitated normalization agreements between Israel and several Arab nations, the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco, signaling a new approach to regional peace, kind of bypassing the direct Israeli-Palestinian track for a time.
Our source also points to something he calls the blame game as a significant factor perpetuating this vicious cycle. How do these competing narratives play out, and what impact do they have?
This is a crucial and often highly emotional element of the conflict, yeah. Both Israel and Hamas operate within their own deeply entrenched narratives. Israel's leadership, particularly under Benjamin Netanyahu, as highlighted in the source, consistently emphasizes security concerns and the right to self-defense against groups like Hamas, pointing to attacks like October 7th as justification for military action. Critics, however, argue this often overemphasizes military solutions at the expense of diplomatic ones. Hamas, on the other hand, frames the conflict primarily as a struggle against an oppressive occupation and the harsh conditions imposed on Gaza, particularly the blockade. Its actions are seen as resistance by its supporters, though, as we know, many countries designate it a terrorist organization. These starkly contrasting narratives make finding common ground or even agreeing on basic facts incredibly difficult.
And how does the media, especially in today's hyper-connected digital age, play into amplifying or shaping these narratives?
Oh, the media role is incredibly complex and multifaceted. Our source points out that journalists can sometimes be motivated by the desire for fame through war coverage, which unfortunately can sometimes lead to misrepresentation or unconscious biases. Historically, it notes Arab perspectives were often excluded from mainstream international media until Al Jazeera launched in 1996. It became a significant global news source, though it too faces accusations of bias, naturally. And social media's impact, it's a profound double-edged sword. On the plus side, it amplifies marginalized voices, like Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, though our source does note they can face arrest for posting critical views online. It enables real-time reporting, raises global awareness of humanitarian issues, helps mobilize support, and even facilitates some direct digital diplomacy.
But the downsides?
The downsides are huge. It creates echo chambers and fuels polarization. It's a breeding ground for misinformation and propaganda, including sophisticated deepfakes. It fosters online hate speech. And platform censorship decisions, what gets taken down, what stays up, can be highly contentious and appear biased themselves. It makes navigating information incredibly challenging for anyone trying to understand the conflict objectively.
And these perceptions of bias aren't just online, right? They extend to international relations.
Indeed. Perceptions of bias vary widely and directly fuel distrust, hindering conflict resolution efforts. Many in Arab and Palestinian communities, for instance, feel international policies disproportionately favor Israel, often influenced by Western nations, particularly the U.S. U.S. support for Israel, as the source notes, is rooted in complex factors. Its strategic location during the Cold War as a perceived bulwark against Soviet expansion, shared democratic values, strong domestic support groups. This deep historical and strategic partnership is often cited by critics as primary evidence of this perceived bias, creating a really complex interplay of international relations and deep-seated regional grievances.
Wow. That was a truly comprehensive deep dive into such an incredibly complex and often heart-wrenching topic. We've explored the deeply intertwined histories, the evolution of religious beliefs and conflicts, the long road to statehood, and the unrelenting cycles of conflict that have shaped this region.
It's so clear, isn't it? This conflict is not just about land or politics in a simple sense. It's profoundly about identity, history, trauma, and deeply held beliefs on all sides. And our source makes a powerful concluding statement that actually ties back beautifully to that foundational family feud idea we discussed right at the very beginning.
That's right. The author, Dominique Nar, suggests that Israelis and Palestinians are, at heart, blood relatives, possibly second or third cousins, he speculates. And his prayer for peace in the Middle East culminates in this simple but incredibly profound equation: love plus forgiveness. peace.
Yeah, and he posits that without truly addressing the cycles of revenge, the deep pain of generations losing family members on both sides, history will just repeat itself. It will feel like, in his words, deja vu again in 20 years, with the same core conflicts resurfacing.
This deep dive really reveals that understanding the multifaceted nature of this conflict, with all its historical layers, its religious significance, and its immense emotional weight, is truly the vital first step toward any hope for a lasting peace in the valley, for Israel, for Gaza, and for the West Bank.
And that leaves us with a provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over. If the deepest roots of this conflict might indeed lie in a kind of family feud and shared ancestry, as the author suggests, how might that perspective, that idea of being blood relatives, and his call for love plus forgiveness, peace, truly begin to break a cycle of conflict that's rooted in so many deeply entrenched narratives and so much loss? What fundamental shifts, what difficult steps might need to occur for that aspiration to move from a profound prayer to anything resembling a tangible reality in this troubled region?
Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We hope this has given you a clearer, more nuanced understanding of this vital part of our world.